Happy Tuesday, everybody. And I am so excited about today's presenter because what would be the whole point of having this really awesome webinar series going on 12 years now if I couldn't have all of my favorite people be presenters? And so I've decided to make 2022 the most fun and interesting of all the webinars we've done in the past, shaking it up a little, talking about things that we haven't really talked about before, but we should as we're planning, how the future is going to be. It's been a crazy couple of years. And part of that is that we have found ourselves in a really unique situation where for the first time in my lifetime, where we have more jobs available and less people to fill those jobs, making it a lot more competitive to have the right people in the right seat in your practice. And I'm super excited about today's presenter, Reynolds, who is a dear friend, probably one of the very first friends I ever made in chiropractic over a decade ago. And luckily, after all of those times being friends for the last 5 years, we've had the opportunity to work with each other, which definitely changed the dynamic of friendship, which has made it fun and interesting and challenging for both of us. We've had a lot of growth that he has. It's just amazing. It's all I'm going to say. And he may look familiar to many of you because, again, he's worked in chiropractic for over a decade, but he has spent the last 5 years focusing less on helping practices to grow and more on supporting all of the different organizations that help you grow. So it's not just one person, but all of the people in chiropractic who support your practice. And man, what a tremendous work he has done. So Aaron, I'm going to let you tell them a little bit about your amazing background.
Well, thank you, Christy. And I hope I live up to kind of that opening with this year being about new topics and fun and bringing all the favorite people together. And I just am honored to be here. I've watched the webinar series through the years. I've been fortunate to kind of guest appear here and there. And this will be my first solo run. And part of the reason that we're choosing to do today, and part of the reason I'm so excited about it as we transition into some of what I've brought to the table or have done in my career, is simply because this is unbelievably time sensitive. And oftentimes we look at things as nice to have, but this is mission critical. If you don't understand right now what's going on out there with the workforce and the transition and the impact of what seems to be more like an endemic, then certainly you're going to be behind the 8 ball as you move forward. And we're going to dive into that data today. But before I do, I just want to thank Dr. Foxworth. I want to thank Christy. I want to thank the entire ChiroHealthUSA team for having me, for supporting me. And as much as Christy has shared, I've gotten to play behind the scenes with some of our favorite companies who then support the profession. Those same companies have supported me the exact same way. And the reciprocity and the lack or the overall amount of respect we have for each other is never ending. So I hope to give it my best today. I hope as you guys are listening, I don't throw too much at you too fast. We have maybe a half hour, maybe 45 minutes. We'll see how fast I am talking. But I am going to throw a lot of data at you today. And so get out your paper, get out your pencil. If your staff is together, come together. Let's talk behind the scenes, ask questions, do what you want. And let's go ahead and have just a little bit of fun. So before we get too far into today, here's just a little bit about me. I have a company called SalesWorks. It's a consulting firm. And we, as Christy mentioned, we work behind the scenes with some of the top companies in chiropractic. And I've been very blessed and grateful for the opportunity. I founded my company in 2015. I've had 30 years of sales, leadership, and executive management, and that's a real number. So I started at a young age, but I'm also probably just a hair older than I look. So you put those two things together. I've had 7 years in direct staffing. As a matter of fact, I was a high-level headhunter, and my job for a while was to build electronic health records companies. And this is what's interesting. This is how I ended up in chiropractic. An EHR company had heard of me, called me to help grow them. And well, I ended up working for them years later. And that's really where I cut my teeth in chiropractic. I was introduced as a patient in 1991, as a business in 2005. And I just want to kind of share with you my thought process for today. which is small thinking creates big problems. Don't worry about the hashtag 2BrokeKnees. If we have time, we'll get into that. But I use it really as my own motivation as we go through stuff, and I'll share it later, maybe on a future webinar. But really, as I set the tone for today, that small thinking creates big problems. And so we have a big problem right now, and we need to approach that big problem with big thinking and logic and data. And so that is extremely important to me as we go through. Everything I do, my purpose, my cause, my passion is about my family and watching them grow and watching them be successful. And I share that as well. So for those of you who don't know me, it just personalizes who I am and what I do on a daily basis. And that particular picture was taken as I was rehabbing from 2 broke knees up at Mayo Clinic about 1.5 years ago. And again, for those of you who know me, you know the story. Let's go ahead and dive into the fun stuff. Why, though, we are all here today. I want you to take a moment. I'm going to start the calendar now. And I just want you to take a second and ask yourself what you hope to get from today. And it's straightforward. I'm not going to run the whole minutes and the whole 2 minutes and 30 seconds, in part because I've got a lot to cover and we've got a short window. And don't mind me and my cheapness as I'm using the free clock. So you'll see the ads pop in. But just ask yourself, what do you hope to get from today as we talk about the future of the workforce? And even along those lines, if you don't know exactly what you want to get from today, ask yourself if you think you know what's truly impacting the workforce. Because the reality is all you have to do is show up and sit in a room of 5 or 6 people and you can get 7 or 8 opinions, and their opinions oftentimes without the background as to what's going on. And it could be X, it could be Y, it could be the weather, it could be the business, it could be paying, it could be money, it could be any number of things. So what do you hope to get from today? And what do you really think is impacting the hiring problem, the workforce that we're seeing today? And it's a real issue, not just for today, but going into tomorrow. But the good news is we're not just going to identify a problem. We're going to come up with some solutions. Again, in an interesting time, keep writing, keep going along, but I'm going to take us back to today. So the future of the workforce, if any of you have tried to hire anybody, say in the last, 6 months, it just may feel a little bit like this. And I hope you guys can hear them.
Mike, can I just get in here? Well, I got your resume and everything looks great. You drew a nice smiley face, and I noticed the eyebrows. That way to go the extra mile with the eyebrows. That was fantastic. So I'm feeling pretty good about everything. I just, real quick, if you don't mind, can I just get in here? Strong pulse, love that. And then if you could just breathe on this mirror real quick. There we go, nice and fogged up. That's what I love to see. Pulse breathing, fantastic. So I feel good about this. Can you start on Monday? Yeah, I'll just see how I feel Monday, and I'll let you know. Absolutely, just let us know. Here's the thing, I only want to work like 1 day a week just for a little spending cash. I get it, you got things to do. And obviously, like if I have cash from the week before still left over, then I won't want to work this week. Totally. Just call us, let us know. Just show up. If you show up, you can grab an apron. Okay? All right, I'm going to go now. Take care. Got one. Stacy, got one. You brought a resume. Thanks for looking up. Well, I got your resume.
So that just made me laugh right out of the gate, because that's kind of what it feels like right now. Everybody is fighting for the same person. And Dr. Rosemary's right. One of the answers, learn how to be competitive and find quality employees. Now, sometimes easier said than done, but that is the answer. So let's dive in. We're going to talk about some of these numbers as we go through here, and I'm going to break them down. But I do want you to see this right out of the gate. Now, for those of you who've heard me before, you know I love data. It's easy for us all to be emotional. As a matter of fact, this is an extremely emotional time. And so everybody has an opinion, and almost everybody is planting their flag in their own camp. And that's great. So whatever you're thinking coming into today, that's up to you. But what I hope to do is show you the data behind it. So as you start to write your narrative, you plug this data in and you recognize really what the cause and effect is of what's going on. And honestly, this thing goes all the way back to 1970s. And it started with women having fewer children. And we're going to break that down. But it's left us with 10% and pretty close, actually, to 20% fewer people, depending on the years you look at. Then you've got baby boomers retiring. And this is an interesting one because baby boomers are retiring right now at a clip of 10,000 a day. So simple math, 300,000 a year, 3.6 million annually. In 2020, an additional million baby boomers opted out. They opted out. So you already have some deficiency in place, and then you added an additional million into it, or a plus 33%, greater than what was already projected. And that's 2020. We're still waiting for the final data for 2021 to come through, but the numbers are going to be just as big, if not bigger. So you have all of those folks who are leaving the workforce. And then you have the Great Resignation. And if you haven't been reading about the Great Resignation, and it's hard not to, this thing is very real. On an average year, about 2.2 million people leave the workforce. Retirement, death, opting out, lifestyle changes, any number of factors that come into that factors into that 2.2 million. Well, since July of last year, we're running at over 4 million per month. So now 6 more months of an additional 2 million people, that's 12 million people who have opted out of the traditional workforce. Doesn't mean that they're not working, but it does mean they're not working in a way that we can track historically like we have, and it's not a traditional job. It's more about gig employment. And as you see my last bullet point with Etsy, this was as of December, so I haven't looked again to see where we are now. But during the pandemic, Etsy went from 2.5 million individual Etsy stores to 7.5 million. So that's 5 million people who decided to become self-employed through gig employment just on Etsy. That doesn't include my Uber driver when I landed in Florida the other day and had a business meeting in Alabama, and he's driving me along. He'd been a chef forever, and he had 2 people resign from his job, and they couldn't replace him. So they asked him to do it, the job of the other 2 people, as well as his own. And he said, yes, I will do that. I would like $5 more per hour. And they said, well, we can't do that. That breaks our whole pay scale. You'll be our highest paid employee. And he says, well, but of course, I'm going to do the job of 3 people. Just to hire a different person would cost you X. They said, no, we're not doing it. He resigned on the spot. So that, and he's now driving Uber full time. So that's an example of someone that's out of the everyday cycle. And that's also an example of where an employee missed the mark for what's going on today. So those things come together. Finishing out our list by the numbers, employee trust is at an all-time low. As a matter of fact, a report came out today, and I haven't had time to incorporate it into this particular PowerPoint, that talked about employee confidence is the lowest it's ever been when it comes to the payoff for hard work. Our current group of employees does not believe if you work hard, it will pay off for you. It's the lowest it's ever been. It's a problem. So employee trust is lower, and the death rate is higher. So forget about why. Again, I don't want to get into the weeds of, is it heart disease? Is it this error? Is it that? It doesn't matter. It's data. It's the net number at the end of the day. And so let's dive into these numbers so you guys have an understanding. We'll help identify the problem, and then we'll help create, I hope, the solution. So average number of kids we identified right out of the gate. If you look on the left side of the screen, starting at 1960, going all the way up to 1975. If in 1960, the average woman was having 2.3 kids, let's remove the decimal and call it 23, just for simple math. You take 23 and you go all the way up to 2020, where it's at 1.9. We'll call that 19. So we have a difference of 4. We know 2 is 10%. We know 4 is 20%. So from 1960 to 2020, we're down net 20 people, 20%. Okay? Different years, different variations. You can see it, but you see the trends from 1960 all the way up into 1975. That's when it really turned. And then I picked back up with 2007, going all the way up to 2020. And yes, we had a few more kids during the start of COVID, but nothing that we can make up for the last 50 years. And so if in fact we could double the amount of kids we're having and they were ready to enter the workforce tomorrow, that would be one story. But we're 20 years away from this crop of kids entering the workforce. So we can't count on them to make up for it. So you've already seen a deficiency. What also happened over the last 50 years, you had more double incomes than you've ever had, more two household incomes coming in. So you got beyond that single income into double income. And so if we had more people in the workforce, that means the workforce grew. So we have to backfill for that growth. So not only did the workforce grow with more people on average working per household, but we're having fewer kids per household. So here's where the numbers start to tell the story. Before we get into anything that's going on right now, we go back. We go back. We're behind. Nothing we can do about it. This is already done. All right? Let's talk about our death rate. I understand for some of you this is going to be controversial, depending on how you want to look at death rate. Again, there's a reason I'm not breaking down death rate by cause. Let's not lose focus. This is all about the sheer number. I want you to look at where the death rate was overall, total number of deaths in 2015 to 16. So we increased by 32,000, rough math. You go from 16 to 17. That was actually a pretty big jump that year. You had 60, 70,000 people, 56 and 13. So we'll call that 70 for now. But then you go back to 2018, and after that one big jump, it stabilized again, right? So that year, you're looking at 26. 2018 to 2019, we're dealing with a 15,000 increase in deaths. And then 2020 hits. 528,000 more people on average. So again, I'm not going to be the smartest person on the call. And I don't really care what we call the reason. But the reason still is the net number. We're down an additional 500,000 people. Now, what I haven't broken down for you is what the age group was of all of the 500,000. Did they all come out of today's workforce? Of course not. Of course not. But when you add to the Great Resignation, you add to baby boomers retiring at a greater clip, plus the predicted baby boomer retirement, and then you add to 500,000 more people dying than on average, and again, we're just talking about a people issue. There are not enough people to fill the jobs that are out there today. So I go all the way back to Dr. Rosemary, who's still right. Learn how to be more competitive and find quality employees. And if you're more competitive, by the way, it will take care of quality employees. They'll come to you. Remember, people are either running from something or they're running to something. And our goal is to help create an environment that they're running to. So it removes some of these challenges that we're facing today. And we have to be aware of them. So here's our quit rate. Here's what's interesting about our quit rate. This is being shown in percentages, but the percentages actually mirror the raw number. So if you go from 2.2 to 4 million in actual people, if you look at the percentages here, we're in that 2.2. When you're all the way over here, you're in that 2.2, and then you move all the way over here to where we're above this now, and it's calling it 3-ish%. And you can see what's happened here. Remember, this is 2002. We go down, the economy comes back, and then the economy turns. 2008, 2009. We had more employees than we did jobs. So our quit rate's awfully low. People don't have the freedom that they had, right? So watch what's happening all the way through here. The quit rate goes higher. The economy keeps going up. The stock market keeps improving. People start to feel more comfortable. The pain of the stock market crashing and the economy going down has kind of faded, and the quit rate goes back to its kind of all-time high until COVID. And then it falls off a cliff. Because everybody went home for a few weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, depending on where you were in the country. Depending on where you are in the country, you're still kind of home. But that's what the data shows us. So once people realized what's going on right here, there is a conscious decision that's been made. And look at this trajectory. So if this was a stock, you would want to be investing here. but this is not a stock, unfortunately. This is the future of our workforce. And they are leaving at an all-time high. You factor in those things we've talked about before, and we have to be more intentional in how we run our business, how we treat our employees. And I know some of you are sitting there right now watching this with your employees. And I want to be clear, I'm not trying to walk into a room, light the thing on fire and run out and say, everything has to change. That's not it. It just means that we need to work more closely together to understand what we value, because this tells us our value system has changed and our life has changed. What was important to us here is not important to us here. People value time in an entirely different way than they have. We're going to touch on that while we're here today as well. So this is important. This is raw data. You can look at it, and it's telling you the real story of what's going on. Part of this is a self-made problem. We'd like to believe that trickle down works. We'd like to believe it. It's good in theory. But percentage-wise, people who make under $100,000 give a much greater percentage of their wages to charity and to help other people, percentage-wise. And you can understand how that happens. If I make $50,000 a year and I decide I'm going to give away 10%, let's just stay on gross for simple math. I'm giving away $5,000 over the course of the year to help someone, somewhere, somehow. But it's $5,000 and it's 10% to me, so it's a lot. If I make $5 million in a year, that 10% is now $500,000. And so somewhere in someone's brain, they're comparing $500,000 to $5,000, and they might even say, well, look, so-and-so gave $5,000 and I gave $100,000, but percentage-wise, it's not the same. And so it doesn't trickle down because you've made that much more. If the giving's at the same rate, then we create that much more. And I want to be very clear. To quote one of my good mentors, I am an unapologetic capitalist. So this is not for me to tell you. I'm just pointing out that we don't give at the same rate and trickle down doesn't work. As a matter of fact, what's really happened is this. It used to be in the 50s and 60s and 70s, a CEO made 3.3 times that of what their top 1% earner, or 10% in this particular case, if you kind of look at it backwards, or 0.01. Now it's more than 6 times their top earner, and they're making 351 times of a typical worker. In 1978, it was 31. In 89, it was 61. So while companies have made enough money for the average CEO to be up an exponential amount, that money is not trickling down. It's trickling up. And that's actually creating that disdain that the current generation has for the current system. They're looking at it like, you guys are nuts. There's no loyalty. Because there's no loyalty, I can work all day, every day to watch that person have a $1 billion yacht. While right now, the greatest wage disparity is happening in modern history, it's actually greater than the French Revolution. And you guys can go look it up because we know what happened there. So we have to be aware of what's going on. So I do want to show you a quick video here that I think will resonate. And this is important because even if you're not thinking along these lines, you're going up against me, if you will. And I am thinking along these lines. So let me see if we can get this over here. And let's get this guy going.
This morning we have an update on the story of a CEO who made a stunning announcement on employee pay. This was more than 6 years ago when we first told you about it. 2015, Dan Price is his name. He raised the salary of everyone at his Seattle credit card processing company to at least $70,000 a year, at least. Price's decision was met with predictions of bankruptcy from his worst critics, but we're here to tell you now that has not happened. Instead, the company is actually thriving. And as Carter Evans shows us, the higher pay has helped employees buy homes and start families.
New parents and coworkers Carrie Chen and Alex Franklin can't wait to introduce their son to colleagues at work, a company they say made it possible for them to begin a family in the first place. And you weren't the only ones that had a baby, huh?
No, everybody had a baby.
So the baby boom here. Why do you think that's happening?
We can afford it.
They both work at Gravity Payments in Seattle, a credit card processing company with a CEO who 6 years ago did something that shocked everyone.
And we're going to have a minimum $70,000 pay rate for everyone that works here.
You had people making $35,000 a year, but you told them you were going to double their salary.
Yeah.
And then you actually had to do it.
Right.
How did you pull it off?
Well, it's tricky. I took the $1 million pay cut.
That's right, $1 million pay cut. Dan Price was simultaneously hailed as a hero and eviscerated as an enemy of capitalism.
Lunatic of all lunatics, Dan Price.
First, I think he's a socialist.
I hope this company is a case study in MBA programs because it's going to fail.
But that didn't happen. So you've
Yeah.
almost doubled the number of employees,
Yeah.
and you've tripled business.
Yeah,
And you're still paying a minimum of $70,000 a year.
correct.
How much do you make?
I make $70,000 a year.
To pay his own bills, Price downsized his own life, sold the second home he owned, and tapped into his own savings.
I think it was a big risk.
Andrew Haffenbrad teaches at the University of Washington's Foster School of Business.
It does go against what people expect and what we usually see in terms of corporations and companies.
These days, average CEO compensation is 320 times more than the salaries of their typical workers.
This shows that isn't the only way for a company to be successful and profitable. Do you pay what you can get away with, or do you pay what you think is ideal or reasonable or fair?
Why aren't more companies doing this?
I would say that's the failure of this. I feel like I've been shouting from the rooftop, like, this works, everybody should do it. And zero big companies are following suit because the system values having the highest return with the lowest risk and the lowest amount of work.
But Price thinks Gravity's returns are up in large part because bigger paychecks have led to fiercely loyal employees.
Our turnover rate was cut in half. So when you have employees staying twice as long, their knowledge of how to help our customers skyrocketed over time. And that's really what paid for the raise more so than my pay cut.
Meeting them where they are.
The company did take a hit during the pandemic, losing 55% of its business in March 2020. At one point, Price figured Gravity was only 4 months away from failing, but it bounced back after its employees voluntarily took a temporary pay cut.
We reduced our salary to $40,000.
Yeah, I think we took each about somewhere around 60%.
Are you back up to normal now?
Not only back to normal, Gravity repaid us all of the pay cut that we had voluntarily given up.
Are we gonna get a little playpen in here for you?
Price says Baby Thomas is one of 60 new additions to the company family over the past 6 years. He also claims the number of employees buying homes has gone up tenfold.
We are right on track for the American dream. We have a beautiful baby boy, a wonderful home, a beautiful life. We're not only just living, we're able to thrive.
And they're able to say thank you to the man who made it possible.
He has his dream car, and we're like, hey, let's if we all chip in just a little bit, we can make it happen. And we did.
My employees had done way more for me than I could ever do for them. So the fact that they wanted to get me such an unreal, amazing gift, it's pretty special. I don't know if I can put it in words.
You could have afforded that with your old salary.
Yeah, that's true. I'm way happier now than I was before. Oh, this feels good.
At Gravity Payments, it seems like there's a lot of that going around. For C.
So how does this play to you? Obviously, most of the businesses in chiropractic are not in a position where the CEO, owner, lead doctor is making millions of dollars and can then just go ahead and share all of that. But what it does speak to is reassessing your value system right now. Because again, if you're not reassessing your value system, you're competing for the small pool of employees. If there are 10 job openings, there are 8 employees. So supply and demand is going to be there. And so it's important that you look within to say, where can I or how can I do things a little bit different? And here's what's interesting. As you guys know, I've worked with quite a few clients through the years, and I am a huge proponent of investing in employees because I've never seen it fail. I've never seen happy employees not make a business grow. It's virtually impossible. So we're going to talk about that as we move forward. And again, I am an unapologetic capitalist. This is not about one side versus the other. I'm all for us. But I know that in order for capitalism to thrive, we have to take care of the base level person. And that seems to be the person right now that's just a little bit left behind. So let's talk about some of our strategies to solve these problems. We know what the problem is, right? We've gone through the data. You can see where there's a problem. So the first thing we have to focus on, the number one thing, is people. Are you taking care of your people? Are you meeting with your people? Are you interacting with your people? Do you have honest and open dialogue with your people? Do you know what motivates them? Do you know what demotivates them? These are all things you should be able to answer about your staff. As a matter of fact, if you have a staff 5 or less and you can't answer them, I'm going to push you a little bit. Put this in place today. Otherwise, you're not going to see it coming. You won't know. Process. Can you make the job easier? Are you putting people on a hamster wheel every day where they're running as fast as they can and they're not getting anywhere? Or are you reviewing your processes regularly so you're always making the job easier? It's why I love in the SalesWorks logo, the funnel. It's why I like sales. You start broad, but you fine tune it over time. And remember, there's always a better way. So if you think you've got it down today and you're not open to it, you've already lost, because this particular terrain is changing crazy fast. Technology. Are you using the right technology? So for some of you who have sat in on some of my talks before, you know my wife owns a very big vet clinic here in Iowa, and we're very fortunate. She has 40 full-time employees in the clinic. And with staffing a clinic of that size, it's even more difficult to keep a full staff. Absolutely keep a full staff. So one of the things I challenged her on this year is, can you run with 38? And if you were to run with 38, what would that look like? And can you solve the problem of those other 2 employees permanently with technology? Now, if the clinics continue to grow and you have to continue to hire more, that's a different situation. But can you solve it? So let's assume that a couple hourly employees, by the time you factor in benefits and overhead and all of that stuff, you're looking at $40,000 a year for the employee. Even if they're a $25,000, $30,000 a year employee, by the time you factor overhead and everything else. So if I want to solve a problem for that employee, and I think it can be solved with technology, so many clinics I've spoken to throughout my career say, I can't afford that, because they look at technology as an expense, not an investment that's going to pay for itself over and over and over again. So if that employee costs me $40,000 a year, and I'm going to pay that employee for the next 10 years, that's $400,000. So let's say I go take $200,000 of it and I invest in technology that solves that problem permanently. So that's $200,000. In 5 years, I'm now netting an extra $200,000 over every 5-year window, if not more. And that's for one position, and I'm talking 2. So we're talking about how to utilize technology to solve problems, make an investment in your business, and grow your bottom line. And that's how, when you switch from looking from an expense to an investment, it starts to pay off for you. But now is when you have to do it. And I'm not here because I represent a technology company. I'm here just as in, this is what I'm doing in my house, in our business. And I would encourage every single one of you to do it as well. Look and say, okay, if I'm running a bigger practice that's proving to be a challenge to keep it fully staffed, can I solve any of these problems using technology? And how long will I solve this problem for? And what's that real budget look like? Total cost of ownership, total cost of spend. And finally, consolidation. And this is tricky, especially given the nature of this profession. However, you're paying rent 24/7. How often are you open? And what kind of utilization do you have of the hours? So I just spoke to a doctor last week. This doctor primarily worked in the afternoons. He just partnered up with a doctor who worked primarily in the mornings. They now, when they were each seeing about 5 hours of people a day for the business, that business space is now seeing 10 hours of people a day. They've consolidated cost. They've consolidated staff. They're seeing more patients. They have more coverage, and they've lowered their total cost of doing business. And I recognize that given the nature of chiropractic, not only from where it's come from, but also where it's going, consolidation is a bit tricky. It's a very, very much maverick of a profession over time, and I fully understand it. So I'm not talking necessarily big corporate buyout, everyone come together. I'm saying figure out a way. Here's an example. In order to hire a compliance officer, a full-time compliance officer, is about $60,000. If they're really, really good and they have a ton of experience, maybe more. But the average office doesn't need a full-time compliance officer. So if you split a full-time compliance officer between 10 offices or 6 offices or whatever works, you've lowered that cost and you now protected your practice. You protect your practice, you freed your brain up to grow your business. Because if you're looking behind you to get caught, you're not focused on growth, you're focused on protection. And I want you to be focused primarily on growth because you've taken care of the protection. So people, process, technology, and consolidation. These are 4 very tangible takeaways that can help you fight this problem of hiring people and what we're going to deal with the workforce going forward. Because again, this thing's not going to get fixed. It just has to be adapted to. And the people who are paying attention are actually going to have an easier time going forward because the people who aren't good at this are going to self-identify, like that client or the employer of my Uber driver who wouldn't give him $5 more. Can you imagine the problems they created for themselves? They were already down 2 employees, and now they lost their most reliable one. They were stuck in spirit of the law, letter of the law. So I'm going to give you guys a tool because, again, what Dr. Rosemary said was right. Learn how to be competitive, but find quality employees. And that's where people aren't good. We're not really good at hiring. Because if you're not hiring a lot, you're not good at it. If you do it once every year, you're just not going to be good at it. And there's nothing you can do about it. It takes a lot of practice, a lot of trial and error to get good. So I'm going to give you an exercise from the book Traction. And those of you who have heard me speak, you know I love this book. All of my clients run off Traction. If you haven't read this, it's one of the best things you can do for you and your team. But these 2 quotes I love, and they're not necessarily directly related to what we're covering, but they are. First, vision without traction is merely hallucination. So if you have this grandiose idea of how you want your business to run, but you aren't covering those strategies we talked about, people, process, technology, consolidation, you're not going to have traction. And second, and this one really stands out to me, most people are sitting on their own diamond mines. You're right there right now. The surest way to lose your diamond mine or to get bored, become overambitious. So both sides, you lose interest, it's waning. You think you can do everything. Chief cook, bottle washer, you're everything, you can't be anything. Or you start thinking the grass is greener. Well, it's easier over there. They've got it this way. All of the excuses. It's as simple as this. Find your core focus, stick to it, and devote your time and resources to excelling at it. Do it once, do it right, and repeat it, and then build on it. And as small business owners, we have hard cost, soft cost, and emotional cost. And the hard costs are clear as day. The soft costs are a little bit ambiguous. But what I see, what takes most businesses down, is the emotional cost. I'm not great at running a business. I know I need to do it, but I really got into this to help people. Then help people. Put someone else in charge of making the business decisions with oversight. That's how you gain traction. That's how you'll help your business grow. That's a different webinar for a different day, but you'll find that out in this book. But here's the tool I want you to take with you. It's called GWC. Get it, want it, capacity to do it. Okay? So when you're looking at people, we can go through all the scientific tests in the world. We can go through personality tests. We can do all of this stuff, and they're all going to be helpful. But let's simplify this. Let's reduce to ridiculous. Do they get it? Does the person have a deep meaningful understanding of the seat they've been hired for. Do they know what you want them to do? Do they get it? If they don't, probably shouldn't hire them. They don't have to fully know how to do it today, but do they get what needs to be done? So if their job is to answer to the phone, do they understand that I don't care what's going on at home, they have to be on their game every time the phone rings, because that's the first step in converting. And for those of you who don't think you're in sales, you are. You just don't want to know it. But it starts with a patient calling or coming in and then finding value in converting until they become a lifetime partnership for the two of you that refers. It's just there. The second, do they want it? Does the person work positive? Does the work positively motivate them on a daily basis? Do they even like what they're doing? So they get it. Do they understand, hey, I have to answer the phone and be great? And do I really want to be great? And some people are naturally wired this way. You guys have all hired someone that you didn't have to touch. They were just wired. But the average person needs coaching to get there. And can you identify where they are and help them go? Oh, and by the way, you should be reflecting upon your current hires today and seeing if they get it, do they want it, and do they have the capacity to do it? And if they're missing out on one of the three, don't fire them. That's not what this is about. Figure out ways to remove roadblocks for them to get there. That's what being intentional is about. That's what servant leadership is about. I've managed tons of people. And to some people, they might say I'm hard. But I've fired fewer than 10 people through my entire 30-plus year career. I believe in people, maybe to a fault. So let's find ways to remove roadblocks to build people up. And finally, do they have the capacity to do it? So they get what you want them to do. Do they want it? Get it, want it. And can they get there? I get being a pro football player. I would love to do it. But I can barely climb steps, so I really don't even have the capacity to do it. And I really don't want to be one. But that's a prime example of get it, want it, capacity to do it. I've got 2 of the 3, but the third I can never get to. So when you're hiring and looking at your current staff, run through this exercise. And this is a great exercise when you're doing reviews. And if you're not doing reviews, that goes back to people and processes. You don't know where you are. You're flying blind. Ignorance is not bliss. Establish that open, honest communication. Christy referenced it earlier today. We live by it. Absolutely live by it. Now, we have other problems going on. We all speak within reason the same language, although when I fly down to Mississippi from Iowa, I'm not so certain we speak the same language, but I love what I learn, and I think they love what they learn, and I thoroughly enjoy myself. But some of us can only judge future employees based on what we know. So if you're a baby boomer and you're used to 60 hours a week and you're looking at something through your eyes and you look at a Gen Xer and you say, man, they only want to work 2 hours a day. Well, here's what I promise you. You give your 6-year-old grandkid your phone and they can do in 5 minutes what's going to take you 5 days. So you have to start to take a look top down and understand the terrain has shifted. Have your benchmark shifted? Do you understand what you're up against? So as you're looking at your baby boomers, and keep in mind, you guys can go online and you can look at different studies of generations, and some people will give a broader generational stroke and brush, and some people won't. But as a whole, these are the numbers we're going to work off of today. And so you've got your Gen X, your Gen Y, your Gen Z. And I should say it's Gen Z that's your most gig-based employee. They're looking at parents and grandparents like we're crazy. And in part because they're having to see people work longer. They've seen it. They've seen this work-life balance that we've talked about not really be there. They're gig-based employees. Remember, this is the first generation that valued buying technology more than they did a car. That's important to recognize because they self-identified at the ages of 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. For every previous generation, and Gen Y is on the cusp, but they were still there as well. For every previous generation, like the number one thing you could do was have a car. That was freedom. But you don't necessarily need the same freedom when technology has changed how we interact with each other and what freedom means to each other. And once you understand that that shifted and you know you've got to hire from this group, then you have to change what your value system is and how you present the job. You got to solve problems. And don't think you own them, because you don't. You just don't. If you tell them to work from 9 until noon, expect them to work from 9 until noon. And inspire them over time to ask for more. The old saying, meet them where you are and take them where you want them to go. I grew up in a generation where I was afraid. Well, my family, I'm of the Gen X generation. I'm right in the heart of the Gen X generation. My mom's in the boomer generation, and her parents were Depression era. So I have that carryover pain of being raised by a single mother with not a lot of excess. I better damn work. It's why I've been in sales for 30 plus years. My first sales job was door to door as a 12-year-old. No joke. We needed it. So it just happened. This generation and the next generation is different. Generation Alpha, also known as the I generation, entirely different. But Gen Z grew up with technology and a story. So their whole lifestyle is different and their value system's different. And you need to learn how to use their language. Much more fluid generation than Gen X and Gen Y. Okay? So again, I go back to this because there's so much truth in this. Think of what the job is you need to have done. So for instance, for those of you who struggle with social media, which is like really anybody over 40, within reason. Some of you are great at it. I'm not coming after you. But for a lot of us who are over 40, social media, you're out there. You think you do it right, but you don't know what it is. Kids are boomeranging and they're TikToking out there. And I don't even know what's coming tomorrow. Flip-flopping, knapsacking, who knows what's going to be. But the fact is it's evolving at an unbelievable rate. And so if you need someone to come do that, you may not need them 8 hours a day. So start to talk to people about gig-based employees and how they can solve that problem for you. Because there are kids now who are 15 through 30. My kid just made a video. He put together a fight scene with his Lego stuff the other day and put music to it. And they were coming in and coming out and focusing and refocusing. He's 12. I still don't know how he did it. I'm not going to tell him that 100% yes yet, but I'm pretty sure he's about 12 months from crossing my technology knowledge. And I was an early adopter. So these kids know what's up if you know how to talk to them and you know how to motivate them. But the problem is you don't know how to talk to them, and you're not alone. I'll kind of talk about this story real quick, and then we'll talk about some other stuff. Whoops, happy fingers, as this is up there. So one of my favorite series is a learning management system called Masterclass. So for any of you who have bought Masterclass, it's highly worth it. They have so many different topics where you get to hear from the absolute best of the best. And depending on the day, I'll watch a different class. Like Chris Voss, former FBI profiler, wrote a book, How to Never Split the Difference, and it's about negotiating. Well, in this case, Gino Auriemma, the coach of the UConn women's basketball team, quite honestly, the winningest coach ever, is giving his masterclass on how to be a leader and what it's like to build a successful program. And I love some of the things he talks about. You know, he talks about, in this particular case, what it was like to recruit when they were UConn and nobody knew them. And Pat Summitt was at Tennessee, and she was the queen. And he had to go up and say, this is the program we're going to go up against, and we're going to beat them into perpetuity. And what it was like to recruit a player when he's selling a vision. And then what it was like to recruit when you only get the number one players coming to you, which is luxury he has. And he talks about the importance. But there are two things I want to point out. One is, going back to the previous slide, he said visiting a patient or visiting a potential player's home is entirely different now than it was when he first started. He used to show up. He'd sit in the living room. The family, including the player, would all be there communicating. They'd have this meeting. He'd be able to sell vision and get a sense. He said now he shows up. The family still talks to him, right? The parents. Said, But 9 times out of 10, he'll be talking to a player via the phone and they're in the other room. He's had to evolve for that initial conversation. Now, luckily, he's UConn and everybody wants to go play, so it's not quite as cut and dry as that. But I love the fact that he took time to communicate on how things have shifted, and he adjusted. So when I say it's who wins, me versus you versus them, the winners will be the ones who are intentionally open, nimble, and willing to adapt and grow. That's how I see it. Because if you're not there, you're competing against me. By the way, just as a side note, as we start to wind down for today, he also talks about what he looks for in a player. So he said, because we're UConn now, everyone who comes to me is the top player on their team, and in most cases, the top player in their state. So when I go to watch them, I don't look to see how many points they score, because there isn't a single person that's made it onto the UConn radar or that we're on their radar that they can't take over a game and outscore everybody. That's why they're there. So you know what I really look for? When there's a loose ball, do they dive? When they get a foul, how do they react? When the coach takes them out of the game, how do they interact with that coach? And then when they're sitting on the bench, how do they cheer on their team? Because if you're the top scorer and you're not going to dive for a ball, we can't build a team around you. You're just one-dimensional. But if you're the top scorer and you're going to dive for a ball and cheer on your teammates and be respectful and show deference to your coach, that's how we build these winning teams year in and year out. It's pretty simple. They get it, they want it, and they have the capacity to do it. They want it. They want to do it the UConn way. So you heard me touch on being intentional. I'm going to give you these couple of things and we'll get out of here for today. I believe 100% in intentional leadership. If you're not waking up every day to be the best leader you can be for your people, you're now competing at a deficit against those of us who are. And leaders who operate intentionally, they act with purpose, forethought, and this is my favorite word, authenticity, in service of achieving sustainable and equitable outcomes. These leaders recognize their attitudes and behaviors set the weather for their teams every day. Their presence is their impact. These positive people, I'm just taking some liberties, these positive people show up and you can feel it. You're attracted to them. They draw you in. For those self-aware leaders, this is a powerful truth, and it can be harnessed to benefit the team, and you see it. It's contagious. But for the oblivious, the effects can be costly. If you're an ass and you don't know you're an ass, and you show up I have more colorful words, but we'll keep it relatively clean. You show up every day and you bring your assiness to the people in this environment, your business will die. End of story. Be good to people, be intentional, remove roadblocks, have expectations and agreement. I am not telling you to lay down. I drive as hard as anybody I know, but we do it with mutual respect and reciprocity. So you need to be intentional in your leadership. And if you agree to being intentional, you have to find your purpose, your cause, and your passion, and people need to know it. And so I'll use ChiroHealth. I'm so grateful to have them as a client. This is how every Monday meeting starts with the entire team. Our purpose, cause, and passion is improving the lives of our doctors, their patients, their teams, and our team. We know if every decision we make, we use that as a barometer. Oh, and by the way, if we can't make up our mind, let's say as an executive team, we're split, we go to the core value. Does this improve the quality of lives of our doctors, their patients, their teams, and our teams? And if it doesn't, regardless of what the upside is, we don't do it. In an interest of time, I'm not going to have us do this last exercise of the day, but I'm going to give it to you. But I do want you to remember this. A leader is not a leader until they create leaders who create leaders. You'll have read it in Leaders Make Leaders. Somebody else kind of took it and ran with it, and I love this version better. A leader's not a leader until they create leaders who create leaders. That means your leadership is cascading. So it's not always about, are you paying them the most? It's about leadership. going all the way back to that Dan Price. He led by example, and he's the happiest he's been. Not everybody has that. But here's the exercise I want you to do after today. What are the 5 things you do well? These are the behaviors that draw people to you. If you don't know what they are, how do you repeat them? Go look yourself in the mirror. And for those of you who know you're kind of an ass, this is where this exercise is going to help. Because what are the 5 areas you know, if being honest, you should or could improve on? And it's as simple as this. 5 things you know you do well that people come to you for, repeat them time and time and time and time again. Those are your strengths. What are the 5 areas you should improve upon? Right here. Start working on them one at a time and make it your goal to get better at all 5 of them over the next 12 months. That's how you get traction. So you can do this exercise on your own. But in order for you and your teams to succeed as you grow, you have to have trust. Trust allows you to have healthy conflict. So I'm building top up, not or bottom up. Healthy conflict allows you to come to terms with a decision that you can have commitment. With commitment, you're not afraid of accountability. If I'm bought in and you're bought in, so remember what we talked about before, this isn't about bending over backwards. This is creating an environment that has a high level of trust and a healthy level of conflict so you can find a commitment that everybody can buy into, which allows you to hold each other accountable, which ultimately creates results. So you know what the problem is in the future of the workforce? I've given you guys some strategies on what to look for internally. I've given you guys some strategies on what to do when hiring. We've identified what's going on from a competitive landscape. And because so many of you work with hourly employees, be mindful. Because certain hourly employees are breaking the mold right now, so you are up 52 to 55% of all employees are looking for new employment. 45% are open to change this year. So that's math. If you think it's not happening in your world, find out, double check. And then the same thing for employees. The grass isn't always greener. So talk to your employers, work together collectively, because if we're all in this profession, we're here to serve. We know the uniqueness of being a part of this chiropractic family. And so we do have a wild card in what we're doing. So let's lift this entire profession up collectively, and let's do it in a way that allows us to stay competitive, grow our practices, thrive. And as Dr. Rosemary shared again, she's been a superstar, having kind of given the extra bump to traction. Every business I know who ran traction grew during the pandemic, hands down. So Christy, I want to thank you. I threw as much as I could out in our hour. I probably could go for 5 hours. I'm passionate about this, but I want you guys to fight with your eyes open and your head up so this profession continues to move forward.
Thank you so much, Aaron. I forgot to mention, I meant to do this in the intro, but fun fact, there actually would not be a webinar series at ChiroHealthUSA without Aaron's assistance. When I first started, I barely could operate technology. And Aaron is the one who helped me start the webinar series, even though he was running a competing webinar series for his own company. And then I think we were back to back in the weekly webinars back when like everybody was doing a webinar series. And so thank you, Aaron, because here we are all these years later and still going strong.
Well, you're welcome. And you only took what I had and ran with it. And for those of you who don't know me personally, I'm a huge proponent of co-opetition. I recognize we're in competition, but the reality is this profession is too small and the general public needs this. And we need to uplift this entire profession to get utilization rates higher throughout the country and make the viability and sustainability of our practices that much greater, because there isn't a single person that can argue right now, regardless of what camp you're in, there is no better antidote to fighting where we are today than overall health and understanding your body's full potential. And there's nobody better to carry that flag than our chiropractic professional brothers and sisters.
Amen. I love it. What an incredible way to end the webinar series today. I posted a link just to remind y'all to make sure you register for next week's webinar. We're going to be talking about protecting your assets, making sure you have adequate insurance, that you're not overinsured and you're insured in all the right ways to protect you and to protect your business. We have Abigail from NCMIC who's going to be here. And it says slips and falls to tables and walls. So make sure you register for that. The week after that, we're going to be talking about planning patient events. We're going to have a very special guest, Dr. Hillary here. He's going to share with us what she's been doing in her community for the last couple of years. And basically, she is the go-to event planner in her community, and it has helped to explode her business. And it actually, her events have nothing to do with chiropractic. She just hosts them at her chiropractic office. But what it did was educate an entire community about the benefits of chiropractic, because that was never her intention. It was kind of like this amazing thing just happened. And she's going to share her story and her ideas about planning events to give back to your community and how it will give back to you in this profession. So I want to thank you so much for spending your Tuesday with us. And I cannot wait to see you next week at the same time, same place. So have a phenomenal day, a fantastic week, and I will see you next time. Bye, y'all.